Most Sunday mornings, we have either a reading or a video for you as a source of inspiration. This morning, it's a sort of a two-part reading, very brief, that comes from a book titled Blues Ain't Nothing But a Good Soul Feeling Bad, Daily Steps to Spiritual Growth. It's by Sheldon Kopp. And I'm going to read you 2 days because it's literally like a daily reader, right? So I'm going to read you May 2nd and May 26th. So May 2nd reads, once several members of a Hasidic congregation had become helplessly lost in a dense forest. They were delighted when unexpectedly they came upon their rabbi who was also wandering through the woods. They implored, "Master, we are lost. Please show us the way out of the forest." The rabbi replied, "I don't know the way out either, but I do know which paths lead nowhere. I will show you the ways that won't work, and then perhaps together we can discover the ones that do." Another spiritual leader, Teilhard de Chardin, wrote, "We are one, after all, you and I. Together we suffer, together exist, and forever will recreate each other. We have only ourselves and one another. That may not be much, but that's all there is." May 26th reads like this. At times, our lives get out of control. There will be undeserved troubles, major disappointments, even debilitating illnesses and injuries. If it's not one thing, it's another. Some suffering cannot be helped. Complain as we might about how helpless we feel, that won't work either. No matter how hard we try to live right, sometimes we will be granted a mess so unmanageable that it seems impossible to endure. But it can't be helped. No matter how helpless we feel, sorting through suffering to try to transform garbage into something good won't change our lot. There's no use arguing about it. Even if we didn't make the mess, we're the ones who have to clean it up. Life just keeps coming at you. Your only impact is how you live it. So earlier this week, one of our kids said to me, "I wish there weren't so many choices of jobs to do." And I dug a little deeper. And basically the point was there are so many interesting and cool things to do. How do you ever decide? And the moment threw me back 20 plus years to an evening around the dinner table. I was in high school. My brother must have been home from college. And I can picture us sitting there, my dad in the spot in front of the window where he still sits for family dinner to this day. My brother at his place, me at mine. Dinner ended, but the conversation went on, and for the life of me, I cannot remember how it started. But essentially, my brother and I were complaining that there were too many choices, that it felt scary to know that if you made one, you were closing doors on others, and that felt like it engendered so much fear that you couldn't even make a choice. And my father was absolutely incredulous. My dad grew up in Jersey City. His mother stayed home. His father owned a local pharmacy. And they weren't starving, but they weren't doing great. He tells stories about the kid who came to school with mayonnaise sandwiches. And he says it wasn't that bad, but it wasn't that much better. And that night around the table, he communicated a combination of shock, maybe a little disgust, honestly, at the idea that somehow too many choices was bad. He'd experienced his own life as having very few choices, and he just could not understand what we were saying. And I think in retrospect, there was a little bit of anger too, that he'd worked so hard to try and make sure we had choices. And here we were sitting there moaning about it when he would have loved the opportunities and open doors in front of us. It was a robust, at times hard conversation that has clearly stuck with me. And I do understand how my father felt impacted by that limitation, right? That his choices and his happiness were different because of the doors that were open or closed. And I really do get how privileged my brother and I must have sounded. And that the comparison to the cereal aisle probably didn't help our cause, right? Like when you go to the cereal aisle and there's just so many cereals and you don't know what to do. But I maintain that the heart of what my brother and I were fumbling to communicate is true, that life is full of choices that we make, and that some open doors and some close doors. And more than that, life is full of a wide variety of external obstacles, things we can get through, Sometimes things we can work around, and sometimes things that send us in an entirely different direction because they are just insurmountable, immovable. Our culture likes to teach children that they can be anything and have all these choices, and every obstacle can be overcome if you work hard and you try hard and you dust yourself off and you pick yourself up and you do it again. But the truth is, walking down some paths shuts off others. Some things cannot be changed. Some things cannot be overcome. Some things are irrevocable. When we lose someone to death, we cannot get them back. When we choose to adopt that cute puppy, we are not choosing to adopt the other cute puppy. When we decide to study biology instead of going all in on our basketball career, we are closing certain doors because time marches on. When we commit ourselves to a life partner, it closes doors to other ways of being in the world. When we choose to raise a child, the path before us takes a certain shape we can't undo. Now, I imagine if I asked you to, you could think of a moment in your own life when you made a choice that closed a door. Maybe it opened others, but it closed some. So do it. Take a moment. You don't have to share it with anyone out loud, but take a moment. Is there a moment in your personal history, a choice that you go back to and recognize in that moment, I shut doors? And sometimes do you wonder, if I hadn't done such and such, perhaps I could have done this other thing? A moment when you took a path and it made others disappear. We make choices all the time, and there are consequences. Not everything is or remains available to us, in spite of what we might wish. And there are challenges and obstacles over which we have no control. Maybe we have chosen a career that doesn't allow us the freedom to choose where we live, and we are sent somewhere we never would have gone. Maybe our greatest passion in life is guitar playing, but a congenital weakness in our wrist makes it painful to play. Maybe we long to have biological children, but we can't. Maybe we want to try something new in our life, but the constraints of time and money and family make it functionally impossible. If I asked you to, I'm guessing you could think of a time when you faced an obstacle that couldn't be overcome, no matter how hard you tried. Just take a moment. You don't have to share out loud. But was there a time in your life when you faced a challenge that could not be gotten through, could not be gone around or gone over, a hill that was truly unclimbable? We like to think that the impossible can happen, and sometimes it does, but often it does not. Our readings this morning, I told you, were the 2 days in May in this book of daily brief reflections by a psychotherapist and author named Sheldon Kopp. The first one spoke to me the minute a colleague shared it. A congregation lost in the woods, looking for a way home, they turn to their rabbi, thinking their spiritual and religious leader will know the way. And the answer that comes is, I don't know the way either, but I can tell you some ways that won't work. And I'll share with you that I feel that way sometimes, both as minister and as parent. I don't have the answers either. Just some helpful suggestions. I'm facing the same obstacles, the same feelings and hurts and joys and worries, and sometimes all I know how to do is point in one direction and say, definitely not that way, right? Let's try this instead, but definitely not that. So often we feel lost in a wood, unsure of which direction holds promise and which holds impossibility. And that's where that second reflection comes in, that reminder that life keeps coming, and sometimes it seems impossible and unmanageable, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it just feels awful, and no amount of shining that turd is going to make it a pearl. I think we make a mistake when we tell our children or tell ourselves that A, everything can be overcome, or B, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Yes to resilience, yes to grit, yes to knowing the depth of your own strength built by living and experiencing the world. No to valorizing suffering. No to pretending that misery is always noble. And I want to be clear about that because I'm about to say something that's going to sound like I'm undercutting it, but I promise I'm not, okay? So I'm saying no to pretending that there's something inherently noble in misery and suffering and the impossible. When we close doors, or when life makes our desires or hopes impossible, when something is irrevocably in the way and we can't change it, what we can change is how we relate to it, right? Like that's the only thing we have control over. And I'm not saying that we should turn every bad thing into a silver-lined lesson. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when the roadblocks are impassable, we can learn not to take either extreme, not making sort of idols of challenge, but also not letting them take us down. To hopefully make this a little more clear, I'm sure everyone has heard expressions like, we're only given what we can handle. Have you heard that one before? Yes. It's an opportunity to grow. Have you heard that one before? You can tell from my face how much I don't like that one. Everything happens for a reason. Okay, I would put all of these down as bad theology, personally. We do it to make ourselves feel better, to prove that we've come out the other side of some hard thing. But it's really hard to say those phrases sincerely when we think about like a single parent who loses their job and whose kids lose their home. What's the reason? It's hard to say those phrases sincerely when we think about Tyree Nichols. There's no silver lining. There's nothing noble in this. There's just trying to take the next step of living in a world in which choices have been taken away, options have become limited, or the life we thought we would have becomes a distant dream. The way to take that next step, most honestly, most productively, to create the most healing, I think, is rather than going to these extremes, to integrate the existence of impossible things into our understanding of the reality of life, neither glorifying nor castigating the losses, the obstacles, the challenges. When it comes to overwhelming choice, I think maybe the trick is to look at the world as it is and just take a step, present in the moment, knowing that loss and the impossible are inevitable, gather all the info we can, and then just choose a cereal. We can't tell ourselves the whole time that we'll be able to go back and change it or fix it, because sometimes that isn't true. All we can do is say that right now, with the information we have, we are doing the best we can, and we're enjoying the heck out of it. We can just know that we've done what we could in the moment. And I will say that it has put in my mind all week the Robert Frost poem, not to like be trite about it, but the one that is like very often misread. I'm sure you know it, right? Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. That poem lives pretty large in our collective understanding. If you ask most folks, I suspect they would tell you he took the rough and hard road and it's forged him into a better man. But in fact, he says twice that the roads are essentially the same. And he acknowledges that though he might tell himself he can come back to the one he didn't choose, the reality is almost certainly he will not. And perhaps most importantly, at the end, he matter-of-factly states, without any value judgment, that his choice made all the difference. Good, bad, who knows? It made a difference. His choice set his life, closed some doors, sent him on his way. We might say that he is taking that integration path, not making some fairy tale of the choice and the suffering that come with closing the door, not being stuck and unable to move forward, just taking the next step. In the poem, Frost had a choice between two equal paths. We've all been there. Even when the paths are not equal, even when one road is impossibly overgrown, we can sit down, weep, gnash our teeth. It's a necessary part of integration and moving on. And then we have a choice to either stay there, stuck, or try to find the next way. When it proves impossible, and we've grieved as we need to, we can abandon that, try to find the next way, the next step. There's a very old TV show. Clearly, I'm all about giving you TV recommendations this morning. There's an old TV show starring Sir Derek Jacobi based on mystery novels about a medieval monk. It's called Cadfael. If you have never seen it, I highly recommend it. There's an episode where he learns that he has a grown son he never knew he had. And in that episode, he says the line, and this is 25 years ago I first heard it, right? He says the line, "There is no profit in ifs, child. We go from where we stand." And I've loved that quote for many decades now, because I think it is about integration, about living life from the moment we are in, absorbing the realities of the world around us, not dwelling in what might have been or getting stuck in front of changes we didn't choose. It doesn't mean that we don't try to run up the warped wall and scale the obstacles. It doesn't mean we accept the bad things in the world that can be changed. It means that we see what is, we do what we can, and when there's nothing to be done, we learn to let that be okay, and we just take the next step forward. So here's one truth I know, one road I can point us down. No matter what we face, we find that next step best by surrounding ourselves with our team, accepting the reality of what is hard, remembering what is good, and focusing on love. May we have the sense to allow ourselves to be companioned and championed by others. May we have the strength to face the world as it is. May we have the wisdom to see the beauty and to dwell on it day after day. May our hearts remain open to loving and being loved, and may we take the next step, finding, creating the way. So may it be.